I stepped aboard the Northern Star with my duffel bag weighing down my shoulder and the smell of diesel fuel burning my nostrils. The metal deck plates rang hollow under my boots. I'd driven 8 hours from Montreal to get here, running on coffee and desperation after losing my warehouse job 3 weeks ago. The ship stretched longer than I'd expected. Rust streaks ran down the white hull like old tears, and the wheelhouse rose 5 stories above the main deck. Cargo cranes stood ready along the port side, their cables swaying in the wind. This wasn't the kind of work I'd planned on, but my savings account had other ideas. Salt spray hit my face as the Northern Star rocked gently in her berth. The Gulf of St. Lawrence stretched out beyond the harbor, gray water meeting gray sky at a line I couldn't quite make out. I'd never worked on water before. The closest I'd come was the ferry to Toronto last summer. My boots slipped a little on the wet deck. I grabbed the nearest railing and steadied myself. The motion felt strange under my feet, like the whole world had decided to shift just slightly off balance. I'd get used to it. I had to. Other crew members moved around the deck with the easy confidence of people who belonged here. They handled ropes and checked equipment without looking, their hands knowing where everything was supposed to be. I felt like I was wearing a sign that said "New Guy" in bright red letters. The wind picked up, and I pulled my jacket tighter. October in the Maritimes bit harder than I'd expected. Back home, this would just be cool weather. Out here, with nothing between you and the open water, it cut right through everything you wore. I was looking for someone to report to when footsteps approached from behind. I turned and saw a man in his late 50s walking toward me. He had gray hair sticking out from under a knit cap and deep-set brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His hands were weathered and rope-scarred, and he moved with the rolling gait of someone who'd spent decades on shifting decks. "You must be the new hire," he said, extending his hand. "Corey Palmer. Been working these waters for 23 years. I shook his hand. His grip was firm and calloused. "John Knight. Thanks for having me aboard. Captain Jensen speaks well of you, says you're a hard worker." Corey glanced around the deck, checking to see who might be listening. The other crew members were busy with their tasks, but something in his manner made me pay attention. "You ever work on water before?" "No, sir. Warehouses mostly. Some construction. Different world out here." He looked toward the wheelhouse, then back at me. "Especially in these waters." The way he said it made my skin prickle. There was weight behind those words, like he was trying to tell me something without actually saying it. I'd heard that tone before from the old-timers at the warehouse when they talked about which supervisors to avoid or which equipment had a habit of breaking down at the worst possible moment. Corey reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The creases looked deep, like it had been folded and unfolded many times. He glanced around again, then pressed it into my palm. "This'll keep you alive," he said quietly. "I know how that sounds. I know you probably think it's just some old salt trying to spook the rookie. It's not." I looked down at the paper in my hand. It felt ordinary enough, just regular notebook paper worn soft at the edges. "What is it?" "Rules. 6 of them. Follow them exactly. No exceptions, no shortcuts." His voice dropped even lower. "I've seen what happens when people don't." The seriousness in his voice made me want to unfold the paper right then, but something about the way he kept watching the other crew members made me wait. This felt like the kind of conversation you didn't want to have in front of everyone else. "Corey, I appreciate the advice, but just read it," he said, cutting me off. "Read it tonight when you're alone. Memorize it, and for God's sake, don't treat it like a joke." I nodded and slipped the paper into my pocket. "Okay." He studied my face for a moment, like he was trying to decide if I meant it. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded once and stepped back. "Good. Captain'll want to see you before we shove off. Wheelhouse, top deck." He started to turn away, then stopped. "John?" "Yeah?" "Welcome aboard the Northern Star. I hope you make it through your first season." The way he said it made my stomach tighten, not, "I'm sure you'll do fine," or "you'll get the hang of it." "I hope you make it through." Like there was real doubt about whether I would. After he walked away, I pulled the paper from my pocket and unfolded it carefully. The writing was in blue ink, neat but hurried, like someone had written it quickly but wanted to make sure every word was legible. 6 rules, numbered 1 through 6. 1. Check weather reports every 4 hours. If conditions change, tell the captain immediately. 2. During storms, stay below deck. No exceptions. Don't go topside for any reason until the all clear. 3. Never take a small boat out alone after dark. Always travel in pairs, and always tell someone your route. 4. If you see a ship that looks empty or abandoned, do not approach. Report it to the captain and change course. 5. If fog rolls in suddenly, alert the captain and all crew immediately. Get inside and stay inside until it clears. 6. Never keep any fish that glow or seem to give off their own light. Throw them back immediately and wash your hands thoroughly. I read through the list twice, trying to make sense of it. Some of them seemed like basic safety measures, checking weather, staying inside during storms. Others felt stranger. Don't approach empty ships, fish that glow. The last one bothered me the most. I'd heard of bioluminescent fish, but the way it was written made it sound like something else entirely. Throw them back immediately. Wash your hands thoroughly. Like they were dangerous somehow. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket just as heavy footsteps approached across the deck. A man in his early 30s with black hair and dark eyes walked over, carrying a coil of rope over his shoulder. "You the new guy?" he asked with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. "John Knight." "Braden Murray. Good to have another hand aboard." He set down the rope and wiped his palms on his jeans. "You look confused about something." I almost mentioned the list, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way Corey had acted, like this was information that needed to be handled carefully. Just trying to get my bearings. "Fair enough. This your first time on a cargo ship?" "First time on any ship." Braden grinned. "You'll love it. Nothing like being out on the water. Free as you want to be." He glanced toward the stern where Corey was checking equipment. "Old Corey, been filling your head with ghost stories yet?" "What do you mean?" "Guy's been out here too long. Sees monsters in every wave, danger in every cloud. Don't get me wrong, he knows his job, but he's got some strange ideas about these waters." I felt the paper in my pocket again. "Strange how?" "You'll see. Just remember the Gulf's been sailed for hundreds of years. If it was as dangerous as Corey makes it sound, nobody would come out here." Braden picked up his rope again. "Captain wants all hands ready to cast off in 20 minutes. You should check in with him first." I thanked him and headed toward the wheelhouse, but his words stuck with me. Ghost stories, strange ideas. It made me wonder what Corey had seen out here that convinced him those rules were necessary. The wheelhouse stairs rang under my boots as I climbed. Through the windows, I could see a man in his 50s studying charts spread across a wide table. He had graying hair, a thick beard, and the kind of presence that filled a room even when he wasn't speaking. I knocked on the door frame. "Captain Jensen, I'm John Knight." He looked up and studied me with steel blue eyes. "Right on time. Come in." I stepped inside and he gestured to a chair across from his chart table. The wheelhouse felt solid and professional, with navigation equipment humming quietly along the walls and radio chatter crackling from multiple speakers. "Corey says you're ready to work," Jensen said. "Yes, sir. I appreciate the opportunity." "Good. We'll be hauling cargo up to Sept-Îles, then fishing the northern banks before heading back. 2 weeks if the weather holds." He rolled up one of his charts and fixed me with a direct stare. "I run a safe ship, Knight. That means following orders without question and reporting anything unusual immediately. Understood?" Understood. Excellent. He stood and moved to the forward windows, looking out over the deck where the crew was preparing to depart. The Gulf can be unpredictable. Weather changes fast, currents shift without warning. Pay attention to the experienced hands, and you'll do fine. A voice crackled over the radio, reporting weather conditions for the northern Gulf. Jensen listened intently, then made notes on a pad beside his charts. When the report finished, he turned back to me. All hands on deck in 10 minutes. We're casting off. I stood and headed for the door, then paused. Captain, is there anything specific I should know about working these waters? His expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. Like what? I don't know. Local conditions, things to watch for. Jensen was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Listen to Corey Palmer, he said finally. He's been out here longer than anyone. If he tells you something, you'd do well to pay attention. Yes, sir. Outside, the crew was already gathering near the bow. I joined them as Jensen's voice came over the ship's intercom, calling all hands to prepare for departure. The dock workers cast off our lines, and the Northern Star's engines rumbled to life beneath our feet. I stood with Braden Murray and a thin man with glasses who introduced himself as Terry King, the navigator. As the ship pulled away from the pier, I watched the harbor shrink behind us and felt the deck motion change from the gentle rocking of a moored vessel to the longer, deeper movement of a ship underway. The paper in my pocket felt heavier as we cleared the harbor and entered the open waters of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Whatever Corey Palmer had seen out here, whatever had convinced him to write those rules, I was about to find out for myself. The shore disappeared behind us, and there was nothing ahead but gray water and gray sky. I'd been on the Northern Star for 3 days and nothing bad had happened. The weather stayed clear, the work was straightforward, and I was starting to think Corey Palmer had been trying to scare me. The cargo duties weren't complicated. I learned to operate the winches, secure the loads, and check the tie-downs every few hours. Captain Jensen had me working with Terry King most of the time, learning the routine. Terry was patient and thorough, explaining each step twice before letting me try it myself. We passed 2 other vessels during those first days. Both times it was broad daylight. Both times they responded to our radio calls with normal chatter about weather and fishing conditions. I watched them through binoculars as they went by, seeing crew members moving around their decks, doing regular work. No empty ships. No mysterious fog. Just normal maritime traffic going about their business. The weather reports came in exactly as predicted. No sudden changes, no storms brewing on the horizon. I checked them every 4 hours, like the rules said, but it felt like going through the motions. The barometric pressure held steady. The wind stayed light, and the forecast called for more of the same. I started to relax. Maybe Corey had been at sea too long. Like Braden said, maybe 23 years of watching the water had made him see threats that weren't really there. I still kept the paper in my pocket and followed the rules, but they seemed like old sailor superstition now, harmless precautions from someone who'd let his imagination run wild. On the 4th morning, Braden found me during our break. "Want to try some fishing?" he asked. "Captain says we've got an hour before the next cargo check." I'd brought a rod thinking there might be time for it. "Sure. Where do we set up?" "Stern's the best spot. Current's right and we won't get in the way of operations." We walked to the back of the ship where Braden had already rigged 2 lines. He handed me one and showed me how to bait the hooks with the squid he'd brought from the galley. "What are we fishing for?" I asked. "Whatever's hungry. Cod, maybe some haddock. Sometimes you get lucky and pull up something bigger." The water was deep blue-green, cleaner than I'd expected this far from shore. I cast my line and watched it disappear into the depths. Braden's technique was smooth and practiced. He'd obviously done this plenty of times before. "You fish much before this job?" he asked. "Some. Lakes mostly, up near Montreal. Never tried ocean fishing?" "Different game out here. Fish fight harder, and you never know what's down there." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, feeling the gentle tug of the current on our lines. The sun was warm on my back, and the steady rumble of the ship's engines was almost soothing. This was the kind of work I could get used to. Braden's rod bent suddenly. "Got something?" he said, setting the hook with a sharp upward jerk. Whatever he'd caught was strong. His rod curved in a deep arc, and I could hear the reel's drag system working as line peeled out. Braden braced his feet and started working the fish, reeling when he could, letting it run when it fought too hard. "Big one," he said through gritted teeth. "Really big." I reeled in my own line to stay out of his way. The fight went on for 10 minutes, Braden gaining line slowly, then losing it again when the fish made another run. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on up here." Finally, the fish tired. Braden worked it toward the surface, cranking the reel steadily now. I moved to the rail to get a look at his catch. The fish broke the surface about 20 feet from the ship, and I stopped breathing. It was big, maybe 3 feet long, but that wasn't what made me stare. The fish was glowing, not reflecting sunlight or showing the normal silver flash of scales. Actually glowing, with a blue-green light that pulsed along its sides like electricity running through its body. "Holy shit," Braden said. "Look at that thing." The fish writhed on the line, and every movement sent waves of eerie light rippling across its scales. Even in the bright morning sunlight, the glow was unmistakable. It looked like the fish had swallowed a neon sign. Rule 6 hit me like a punch to the gut. Never keep fish that glow or give off light. Throw them back immediately and wash hands thoroughly. "Braden," I said, "you need to cut that line." "What? Are you crazy? Look at this thing. I've never seen anything like it." "Cut the line. Let it go." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "This is the catch of a lifetime. I'm not throwing it back." "It's glowing, Braden. That's not normal." "So what? Maybe it's some kind of deep water species. Something rare." I remembered Corey's face when he handed me those rules, the seriousness in his voice, the way he'd said he'd seen what happens when people don't follow them. "Please," I said, "just cut the line. Trust me." "Trust you? You've been on a boat for 3 days." Braden worked the fish closer to the ship. "I'm keeping this thing. Captain's going to want to see it." The fish was right below us now, still glowing, still writhing. The light seemed brighter up close, pulsing in a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat. Looking at it made my eyes water. "This is a mistake," I said. "This is the find of the year." Braden grabbed the landing net. "Help me get it up." I didn't help. I stood back and watched him scoop the glowing fish out of the water. It thrashed in the net and droplets of seawater scattered across the deck. Where the drops landed, they seemed to shimmer for a moment before soaking into the wood. Braden lifted the net and grinned. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The fish was still alive, still glowing. Its eyes were black and seemed too large for its head. When it opened its mouth, I saw rows of needle-sharp teeth and a tongue that glowed brighter than the rest of it. "Put it back," I said one more time. "Not a chance." Braden headed for the hatch that led below deck. "I'm putting this in the cooler. Captain Jensen's going to flip when he sees it." I followed him, but I didn't try to stop him. What could I do? Tackle him? Steal his fish? He was bigger than me and had been doing this job longer. If I made a scene, I'd look like the crazy one. Braden carried the fish to the storage area below deck. The glow was even more noticeable down here, away from the sunlight. It cast shifting blue-green shadows on the walls as the fish moved in the net. "Look at that," Braden said softly. "It's like it's got its own power source." He opened one of the coolers and dumped the fish inside. Even with the lid closed, I could see faint light leaking out around the edges. "You should wash your hands," I said. Why? I couldn't tell him about the rules without sounding like I believed in ghost stories. Fish slime, salt water. It'll make your skin crack. He shrugged and wiped his hands on his jeans. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. Even as he said it, I could see him scratching at his palms where he'd touched the fish. Red marks appeared on his skin, thin lines that looked like scratches or maybe burns. Your hands, I said. He looked down and stopped scratching. Must be from the net. Rope burn. The marks didn't look like rope burn to me. They looked deliberate, like someone had drawn them on his skin with a red pen. But Braden didn't seem concerned, so I didn't push it. We went back up on deck and finished our break. Braden talked about the fish the whole time, planning how he'd show it to the captain, wondering if it might be worth something to marine biologists. I listened and nodded and tried not to think about the rules in my pocket. That night I lay in my bunk listening to the normal sounds of the ship. The engines, the ventilation system, the occasional footstep from whoever had the watch. Everything seemed normal for the first hour. Then I heard scratching. It was faint at first, like mice in the walls, but mice didn't make steady, rhythmic sounds like fingernails dragging across wood. I turned my head, trying to locate the source. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the ship's structure. The scratching stopped, and the humming started. It was low and constant, just at the edge of hearing. The kind of sound that made your teeth ache and your skull feel tight. I pressed my pillow over my ears, but the humming seemed to come from inside my head now. I sat up and looked around the crew quarters. 3 other bunks, all occupied. Terry was snoring softly. The other crew member I didn't know well was breathing deeply and steadily, and Braden's bunk was empty. The sheets were thrown back like he'd gotten up quickly. His clothes were still folded on the small shelf beside his bunk, but he was gone. I checked my watch. 3:17 in the morning. The humming continued, and now I could hear something else underneath it. Voices, maybe. Too faint to make out words, but definitely human sounds. Conversation. I got dressed quietly and went looking for Braden. The ship felt different at night. Darker, obviously, but also somehow larger. Shadows stretched longer, and familiar spaces looked strange in the dim emergency lighting. I checked the galley, the cargo areas, the common room. No sign of him. I climbed up to the main deck where the night watch should be. Terry was there, checking instruments and making notes on a clipboard. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up. "Can't sleep. Looking for Braden. You seen him?" Terry frowned and checked his watch. "About 20 minutes ago, he was walking around up here, talking to someone." "Who?" "That's the thing. I never saw who he was talking to. Just heard his voice, like he was having a conversation. But when I looked, he was alone." The humming in my head got louder. I found Braden in the galley the next morning, sitting at the metal table with his breakfast untouched. Dark circles ringed his eyes like bruises, and he stared at his coffee cup without drinking from it. His hands rested flat on the table, and I could see the red marks on his palms had spread up his wrists. "You okay?" I asked, grabbing a cup and pouring coffee from the pot. He didn't answer right away, just kept staring at that cup like it held secrets. When he finally looked up, his eyes had a glassy quality I didn't like. "How'd you sleep?" I tried again. Braden stared at me for what felt like a full minute. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again. "It's talking to me," he whispered. I set my coffee down. "What's talking to you?" "The fish, in my dreams." His voice was barely audible. "It knows things. About the water. About what lives down there." The humming I'd heard last night started up again in my head, faint but persistent. "Braden, it's just a fish. A dead fish." He shook his head slowly. "Not dead. Never was dead. Just waiting." He leaned forward across the table, It wants me to join them. Down there. Says I could see things normal people can't understand. I glanced around the galley, hoping someone else would walk in. We were alone. You need to get some real sleep, I said. Maybe talk to the captain about... I can't sleep below deck. Braden's voice cracked. Too close to it. I can hear it better down there. Calling. Frederick walked into the galley then, pouring himself coffee and nodding at us both. When he got a good look at Braden, his expression changed. Murray, you look like hell, Frederick said, setting down his cup. When's the last time you slept? Braden didn't answer. He was back to staring at his coffee. I'm ordering you to get some rest, Frederick continued. Go to your bunk and sleep. That's not a request. Can't go below. Braden's voice was flat. Need to stay up here. Need to watch the water. Frederick's jaw tightened. You'll follow orders or you'll find yourself swimming back to shore. Get below deck and sleep. Now. Braden stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor, but instead of heading toward the stairs, he walked to the porthole and pressed his face against the glass. They're out there, he said. Waiting. Frederick looked at me and I saw concern in his steel blue eyes. Real concern. Murray, Frederick's voice carried the authority of 20 years at sea. Step away from that window and go to your quarters. Braden turned around, but he didn't move toward the stairs. I can't leave. What if they call and I'm not here to answer? That's when I knew we had a real problem. Frederick stepped closer to Braden. Son, you're talking nonsense. There's nothing out there but water and fish. You don't understand, Braden said, shaking his head. None of you understand, but I do now. I can hear them. He walked past Frederick and me, but instead of going below, he headed for the door leading to the main deck. Frederick caught my eye and jerked his head toward the door. We both followed. Outside, the morning sun was bright, but the air carried a chill that made me pull my jacket tighter. Braden stood at the port rail, gripping it with both hands. His knuckles were white. I watched him stand there for the next 3 hours. Didn't move, barely blinked, just stared at the water like he was watching a movie. Sometimes he'd point at the waves and nod, like he was agreeing with something. But there was nothing there, just gray water stretching to the horizon. Terry walked past around 10 and stopped when he saw Braden. What's he doing? Terry asked quietly. Watching the water, I said. For what? He says he sees figures moving under the surface. Terry frowned and looked out at the same stretch of water. I don't see anything. Neither did I. But Braden pointed again, this time with more urgency. He leaned forward over the rail, and for a second I thought he might try to climb over. Hey, I called out, moving closer. Braden. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were completely different. Wild, excited. Did you see that? He asked. Right there, about 50 feet out. She waved at me. I looked where he was pointing. Nothing but water. Who waved? The woman with the long hair. She's been following the ship since yesterday. He turned back to the water. She's beautiful. They all are. My uneasiness was turning into something stronger. Fear, maybe. Or dread. Terry backed away from the rail. I'm going to find the captain, he said and hurried off. I stayed with Braden, keeping my distance but making sure he didn't do anything stupid. He kept pointing and waving at empty water. Sometimes he'd cup his hands around his mouth like he was calling out, but no sound came. Corey appeared on deck around noon, took one look at Braden, and his face went grim. He'd seen this before. I could tell by the way his shoulders sagged. How long's he been like this? Corey asked. Since breakfast. Getting worse. Corey nodded slowly. It'll keep getting worse until... He didn't finish. Until what? Until he goes in the water. The words hit me like cold spray. We can't let that happen. Can't stop it either, not once they get their hooks in. I watched Braden lean further over the rail, and my stomach clenched. The rest of the crew started avoiding him after lunch. I didn't blame them. He'd started talking to himself constantly, carrying on full conversations with people who weren't there. Sometimes he'd laugh, sometimes he'd argue. Always he'd stare at that water. Frederick tried ordering him to different parts of the ship, but Braden would just drift back to the rails within minutes, like something was pulling him. Around 3 o'clock, I tried talking to him again. "Braden, you need to eat something. Come inside and get some food." He didn't look away from the water. "They don't want me to leave. Say I need to stay and listen." "Who's they?" "The voices, from the deep places." His voice was getting that whisper quality again. "They know things about the old waters, about what came before. They want to show me." I moved closer, trying to see what he was seeing. Just waves, just endless gray water. "There's nothing out there, Braden. You can't hear them because you didn't touch the light fish. But I did. Now I can understand." He pointed again, more excited this time. "Look, 3 of them now. They're singing." The humming in my head got louder. Not imagination anymore. Something real. "What are they singing about?" Braden tilted his head like he was listening carefully. "About the deep places. About cities under the water where the lightfish come from. They say it's beautiful down there. No storms, no cold. Just peace and light and voices that understand everything." He turned to look at me, and his eyes were bright with something that wasn't quite sanity. "They want me to come see. Say I could live down there with them. Forever." "Braden, listen to me. You're sick. The fish did something to you when you touched it. You need help." "I'm not sick." His voice got sharp. "I'm chosen. They picked me because I was brave enough to keep the light fish. Because I listened when it called." He went back to staring at the water, but now he was swaying slightly like he was hearing music. "The promises they make," he whispered. "You couldn't understand. Wonders beneath the waves that normal people can't even imagine." I was staring at Braden when the horizon changed. The water had been normal all morning, clear gray stretching to the edge of the world. But now something was different. A line of darker gray was moving toward us from the northeast, thick and low against the water. Fog. Not the thin wisps we'd seen before. This was a wall, dense and moving fast, rolling across the gulf like it had somewhere to be. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds before my brain caught up. Rule 5. Never keep fish that glow or give off light, but throw them back immediately and wash hands thoroughly. Wait, no. That was Rule 6. Rule 5. Alert captain and crew immediately if fog rolls in suddenly and stay inside until it clears. I looked at my watch. 12:15 in the afternoon. The weather report at noon had called for clear skies and light winds. Nothing about fog. This thing had come out of nowhere. Shit. I turned away from Braden, who was still mumbling to his invisible friends in the water. "I'll be right back." He didn't answer, probably didn't even hear me. I ran across the deck toward the wheelhouse. The fog was maybe 2 miles out now, but it was moving. Fast. Faster than any fog I'd ever seen. It stretched across the water like a gray curtain being pulled toward us. The ladder to the wheelhouse felt longer than usual. My boots slipped on the metal rungs. When I reached the top, I was breathing hard. Frederick was at the chart table with Terry. Both of them bent over some paperwork. They looked up when I came through the door. "Captain," I tried to keep my voice steady. "There's fog rolling in from the northeast, moving fast." Frederick's face changed. The color just drained right out of it. He pushed past me to the windows and looked out toward the water. Jesus Christ. He grabbed the intercom microphone. His hand was shaking. "All hands, this is the captain. Get below deck immediately. No exceptions. Lock yourselves in until you hear the all clear. This is not a drill. Move now." His voice echoed through the ship's speakers. I heard footsteps running on the deck below us. "How far out?" Frederick asked me. "Maybe a mile now. It's moving really fast." He looked out the window again. The fog was closer, much closer. It looked solid, like you could reach out and touch it. "Terry, get below, now." "Captain, what about—" "Now." Frederick's voice left no room for argument. Terry headed for the ladder. Frederick turned to me. "You too. Get below and stay there." "What about Braden? He's still on deck." Frederick cursed under his breath. "Where?" "Port side near the stern. He's been there all day. Go get him, fast. Then both of you get below and lock yourselves in." I nodded and headed for the ladder. Behind me I heard Frederick on the radio trying to reach the Coast Guard. His voice was tight. The fog was maybe half a mile out when I hit the main deck. It looked different up close, thicker. There were patterns in it, swirls and currents that didn't make sense. And it was quiet. The normal sound of wind and water had gone dead. I ran toward the stern. Most of the crew had already gone below, but I could see Braden still standing at the railing. He hadn't moved. "Braden," I called out as I got closer. "We need to get below deck. Captain's orders." He didn't turn around. He was smiling. Actually smiling, wider than I'd seen him smile since this whole thing started. And there was something next to him on the deck. A bucket. The glowing fish was in it, sitting in maybe 2 inches of water. Its light was pulsing. Steady, rhythmic pulses that seemed to match the movement of the approaching fog. "Braden, come on. We have to go." I grabbed his arm. His skin was hot, like he had a fever. He turned to look at me and I took a step back. His eyes were reflecting the fish's light. Not just catching it, but reflecting it back. Like there was something glowing inside his head. "Can you hear them singing?" he asked. His voice was soft, almost dreamy. "Hear what?" "There's nothing." "They're in the mist. They came with the mist. They've been waiting so long to get close to the ship." I looked out at the fog. It was maybe a 1/4 mile away now. The wall of gray stretched up maybe 50 feet, blocking out everything behind it. And it was moving faster. "I don't hear anything, Braden. We need to get below deck right now." "Listen." He tilted his head toward the fog. "They're calling my name. They want me to come see what they've been trying to show me." The fog was close enough now that I could see individual wisps curling off the main wall. The air was getting colder, and there was a smell. Salt and something else, something organic, like seaweed that had been sitting in the sun too long. "Braden, look at me." I grabbed both his shoulders and turned him away from the water. "The fish is making you sick. This isn't real. It's more real than anything else." He looked past me toward the fog. "They're almost here." He started walking toward the ship's edge. I didn't think. I just tackled him. We went down hard on the deck. Braden was stronger than he looked, and he fought like his life depended on getting back to that railing. He twisted under me, trying to get his arms free. "Let me go," he said. His voice was getting desperate. "They're waiting for me. I can't miss this. You're not going anywhere." He managed to get one arm loose and swung at my face. I blocked it, but barely. His eyes were wild now, and that strange glow was getting brighter. "You don't understand," he said. "They're offering me everything: knowledge, power, a place beneath the waves where I'll never have to worry about anything again." The fog was maybe 100 yards away. I could hear something now, not singing like Braden said, but a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The same sound I'd been hearing in my head, but louder, much louder. "Braden, listen to me. Whatever you think you're hearing, it's not real. It's the only real thing left." He tried to roll away from me. They've been calling me since I touched the fish. They want to show me wonders you can't even imagine. Footsteps on the deck. I looked up and saw Corey running toward us, his face grim. "How close?" he called out. "Too close," I said. "Help me get him below." Corey grabbed Braden's legs. Together, we lifted him off the deck. He kept struggling, reaching toward the fog with both hands. "You're making a mistake," Braden said. "They chose me. They want me to come with them. If you take me away from them now, they'll be angry." The fog was maybe 50 yards out. The humming was getting louder, and I could feel it in my chest now, like a second heartbeat. We carried Braden toward the main hatch. He kept twisting his head around to look back at the fog. "They're so close," he whispered. "I can almost see them now. Beautiful faces in the mist. They're reaching for me." I looked back despite myself. The fog was right there, maybe 20 yards from the ship, and for just a second I thought I saw something moving inside it. Shapes that might have been arms or tentacles or something else entirely. "Don't look," Corey said. "Just keep moving." We got Braden down the hatch and into the corridor. He was still fighting, but weaker now, like being away from the fog was draining his strength. "Where?" I asked Corey. "Storage room. It's got a lock." We dragged Braden down the corridor. He was mumbling now, too quiet for me to make out the words, but his eyes were still glowing. The storage room was small and windowless. We got him inside, and I held the door while Corey grabbed the key from a hook on the wall. "You're abandoning them," Braden said. He was looking right at me, and his voice was clearer than it had been all day. "They came all this way to find me, and you're locking me away from them. They won't forgive this." Corey turned the key in the lock. The humming sound was everywhere now, vibrating through the ship's hull. "They'll remember," Braden called through the door. "And they'll be back." I stayed in my quarters for 3 hours while whatever was out there moved across the deck above me. The ship's hull creaked and groaned under sounds I'd never heard before. Footsteps walked back and forth overhead. Not the familiar boots of Frederick or Terry or Corey. These were different, heavier. They dragged slightly, like someone walking through thick mud. The steps went from bow to stern, then back again, over and over in a steady rhythm that made my skin crawl. Then the voices started. They called out names I'd never heard before. "Margaret," one voice said, clear as day through the metal above me. "Come see what we've brought you." Another voice answered in what sounded like French, but the words were wrong somehow. Old. Like someone speaking a language that had been dead for centuries. I pressed my back against the wall of my bunk and tried to make sense of what I was hearing. The voices weren't coming from the crew. I knew their voices. These were different people entirely. But that was impossible. We were miles from shore, and no one had boarded the ship. Something heavy scraped across the deck from port to starboard. The sound was wet and thick, like a massive rope being dragged through puddles. But ropes don't move by themselves, and this thing was huge. It had to be 20 feet long at least, judging by how long the scraping sound lasted as it moved. The scraping happened again, and again, back and forth across the deck, leaving what sounded like wet trails behind it. I thought about tentacles, massive ones, thick as tree trunks, pulling themselves along the deck with deliberate purpose. I grabbed my pillow and pressed it over my ears, but the sounds cut right through. The voices got louder, calling more names. "Samuel," they said. "We've missed you, Samuel. The deep places aren't the same without you." Then Braden started screaming. His voice came through the walls from the storage room down the corridor. "They're calling me," he yelled. "They want me to come home. Let me out. Let me go to them." The storage room door rattled as he threw himself against it. Metal banged against metal as he pounded on the walls. "Please," he screamed. "They're singing my name. They've come so far to find me." I pulled the pillow tighter against my head. but nothing blocked out his voice. He screamed about the beautiful voices calling him home, about the underwater cities where he belonged now, about the light that would show him wonders beyond imagination. The scraping sounds overhead got faster, more urgent, like whatever was up there could hear Braden too and was trying to get to him. "They're right above me," Braden yelled. "I can feel them. They're reaching for me through the metal. Let me go to them. Please." Something crashed on deck, heavy and wet like a body hitting the planks. Then another crash, and another. I counted 5 distinct impacts, each one shaking the ship slightly. The voices changed then. They got softer, more pleading. "Come with us," they said in unison. "The water is warm here. The light is beautiful. You'll never be cold again." Braden's screaming turned to sobbing. "I want to go," he cried. "Why won't you let me go? They're offering me everything." I stayed curled in my bunk, pillow clamped over my ears, trying not to think about what was happening above me. The footsteps kept walking. The voices kept calling names of people who weren't there. The scraping sounds continued their wet journey back and forth across the deck. Time moved strangely. The sounds would stop for a few minutes, and I'd think it was over. Then they'd start again, louder than before. The voices would call new names. "Robert," they said. "Elizabeth, we remember you, Elizabeth. Come see how we've grown." Braden's voice got hoarse from screaming, but he didn't stop. He begged and pleaded with whoever was listening to let him go to the voices. He described the faces he could see in his mind, the hands reaching for him, the promises of eternal peace beneath the waves. The scraping overhead got so loud I thought whatever was making it might break through the deck. It moved in patterns now, like it was drawing something. Circles and lines that went on for minutes at a time. Then everything went quiet. The footsteps stopped. The voices stopped. The scraping stopped. Even Braden went silent in the storage room. The ship settled into the normal creaks and groans of metal on water. I lay there for another 20 minutes, waiting for the sounds to start again. But they didn't come back. The only thing I could hear was the engine and the waves against the hull. Frederick's voice came over the intercom. "All clear. Report to the main deck for head count." I pulled the pillow away from my ears and sat up. My hands were shaking. My shirt was soaked with sweat, but the nightmare was over. I opened my door and stepped into the corridor. Terry emerged from his quarters at the same time, looking as shaken as I felt. Corey came up from the lower deck, his face grim, but not surprised. "Everyone okay?" Terry asked. Corey nodded. We made it through. We climbed to the main deck together. The fog was completely gone. Clear blue sky stretched in every direction, and the water was calm as glass, normal, peaceful, like nothing had happened. But the deck told a different story. A thin layer of salt covered everything, not the kind that builds up from spray during rough weather. This was different, thicker, like someone had taken handfuls of coarse sea salt and scattered it across every surface. Seaweed lay in wet piles near the railings. Long strands of dark green kelp that should have been growing on the ocean floor, not lying on our deck 50 feet above the water. The seaweed was fresh, still dripping. I knelt and touched one of the salt patches. It was gritty between my fingers and it smelled wrong. Not like ocean salt, more like something that had been rotting in deep water for a long time. Frederick emerged from the wheelhouse, his face pale but relieved. "Everyone accounted for?" he asked. Terry nodded. "All present." "Good." Frederick looked around at the salt and seaweed covering his deck. "We'll need to clean this up before—" "Wait," I said. "Where's Braden?" We all looked at each other. In the relief of surviving whatever had just happened, we'd forgotten about the storage room. I ran to the hatch and climbed down to the corridor below. The others followed behind me. The storage room door was at the end of the hall, and from 30 feet away I could see something was wrong. The door hung open, not just unlocked. Open wide, swinging slightly with the ship's movement. I reached the doorway and looked inside. The room was empty. No Braden. No sign he'd ever been there except for a few drops of water on the floor that glowed faintly blue in the dim light. "The key," Corey said behind me. He was looking at the lock. It still turned. Door was unlocked from the inside. That was impossible. The lock was on the outside. There was no way to unlock it from inside the room. But there it was. Key turned. Door open. Room empty. I ran back up to the main deck and checked the spot where Braden had left the bucket with the glowing fish. The bucket was still there, sitting exactly where he'd placed it before the fog rolled in. But it was empty. No fish. No water. Just a dry metal bucket with a few grains of salt in the bottom. "Search the ship," Frederick ordered. "Every compartment, every corner. Find him." We spent the next hour going through every inch of the Northern Star. Engine room, cargo holds, galley, quarters, storage areas, even the spaces between the walls that were barely big enough for a person to squeeze through. Nothing. No trace of Braden anywhere. The glowing fish was gone too. We checked every container, every cooler, every place it could have been moved, but it had vanished as completely as Braden had. I stood at the port rail where Braden had spent his last day, looking out at the calm water. The sun was shining. The sky was clear. Everything looked normal and peaceful. But Braden was gone, and I knew we weren't going to find him. I'd been standing there maybe 20 minutes when Corey found me. Didn't hear him coming up behind me, but I felt his presence before he spoke. "You understand now," he said quietly. I turned around. Corey's weathered face looked older in the afternoon light, lines deeper around his eyes. He'd seen this before, maybe more than once. "The rules," I said. "The rules." He moved up beside me at the rail, hands gripping the metal. 23 years I've been working these waters, lost 6 good men in that time. Every one of them broke at least one rule. The water stretched out calm and blue, nothing moving beneath the surface that I could see. But I kept looking anyway. "What's down there, Corey?" He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of everything he'd witnessed. "Don't know exactly, don't want to know. But the Gulf takes what it wants, John. Always has. Thing is, it follows certain patterns. Has its own, preferences, you might say." I thought about Braden's glowing eyes, the voices he'd heard, the way he'd fought us to get back to the water. "The fish," I said. "Bait." Corey's grip tightened on the rail. "They use what works. For some folks, it's voices calling from empty ships. For others, it's fog that rolls in when the weather says it shouldn't. For Braden, it was that damn fish." A chill ran down my back despite the warm sun. "How do you know all this?" "Experience, hard lessons, and those rules I gave you." He pulled out another folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket, different than the one he'd given me. This one looked older, more worn. "These came from the man who trained me. He got them from the man who trained him. Goes back maybe 60 years. How many people have died learning these rules?" Corey's face went grim. "Too many. But they're all that's standing between us and whatever lives beneath this water." The ship rocked gently beneath our feet. Normal ocean motion. Nothing like the strange stillness that had come with the fog. "Will it come back?" I asked. "Maybe. Probably not this trip, but someday." He folded the old paper and tucked it away. "That's why you follow the rules, John. Every single one. No exceptions. No thinking you know better." I nodded. The paper in my pocket felt heavier now. Not just superstition anymore. Not old sailor stories to scare the new guy. "Frederick's calling for full inventory," Corey said. "We need to report everything that happened. Coast Guard will want details." We walked back across the deck together. I glanced over my shoulder once at the spot where Braden had stood for his last day. The rail looked normal, just metal and paint. But I knew I'd never look at it the same way again. The next 2 weeks changed everything for me. I followed every rule exactly. Checked weather reports every 4 hours, even when I wasn't on duty. Carried salt in both jacket pockets after Corey told me it helped. Never went on deck alone after sunset, not even to empty garbage or check equipment. The weather reports became an obsession. I'd wake up at night and check my watch, counting hours since the last update. If it was close to 4 hours, I'd get dressed and find Terry or Frederick to ask about conditions. They never complained, just gave me the numbers and current readings. Barometric pressure steady at 30.2, Terry would say. Wind from the southwest at 8 knots. No changes expected. I'd write it down in a notebook I'd started keeping. Dates, times, exact readings. If something changed, I wanted to know immediately. The salt thing felt strange at first. Coarse granules in my pockets, getting under my fingernails when I reached for tools. But Corey had been serious about it. Old protection, he'd said. Don't know why it works, just know it does. I started carrying extra in a small pouch on my belt, just in case. Night watch became different too. Before Braden, I'd sometimes step outside during evening duties, quick trips to secure equipment or check the deck. Now I stayed below after sunset, unless Frederick specifically ordered otherwise. And when I did have to go up, I made sure Terry or Corey came with me. Never alone, I'd remind myself. Always in pairs. The water looked different now. During daylight hours, when it was safe to be on deck, I found myself studying the surface constantly, looking for unusual colors, checking for that blue-green glow that had pulsed from Braden's fish. Sometimes I'd see things, probably just waves catching sunlight wrong, or schools of normal fish moving beneath the surface. But I'd watch until whatever it was disappeared or proved itself harmless. On the 8th day after Braden's disappearance, we encountered the empty vessel. I spotted it first, around 2 in the afternoon. Small fishing boat drifting maybe half a mile off our starboard side. No movement on deck. No response to our horn. My stomach dropped. Rule 4. Never approach ships that appear empty or abandoned. I ran to the wheelhouse without hesitation. "Frederick," I called as I climbed the stairs. "Empty vessel, starboard side." He was at the charts table with Terry. Both of them looked up when I spoke, and I saw recognition in Frederick's eyes immediately. "How far?" he asked, already moving to the radio. "Half mile. Small fishing boat. No crew visible." Frederick grabbed the radio handset. "Coast Guard Station Setil. This is Northern Star. We have an abandoned vessel at..." He rattled off our coordinates. "Single fishing boat, approximately 30 feet. No crew visible. Changing course to avoid. Please advise." The response came back crackling through static. "Northern Star, Coast Guard Septiles. Maintain distance from vessel. We'll dispatch cutter to investigate. Continue on your course." "Roger, Coast Guard. Northern Star out." Frederick turned to Terry. "Change heading. Take us 2 miles west of that boat." "Aye, Captain." No questions. No discussion about whether we should investigate or offer assistance. Frederick knew the rules as well as Corey did. I watched from the wheelhouse windows as we changed course. The empty boat grew smaller in the distance, still drifting with no sign of life. Part of me wondered what had happened to its crew. The rest of me was grateful we'd never find out. "Good catch, John," Frederick said quietly. I nodded, but I kept watching that boat until it disappeared completely. The crew treated me differently after that day. Before, I'd been the new guy, someone to train and watch over. Now, when I walked into the galley or joined work details, I got the same respectful nods they gave Corey. Terry started asking my opinion about weather patterns. Corey included me in conversations about navigation and safety procedures. Even Frederick seemed to trust my judgment more. It wasn't just respect for following the rules. It was recognition. I'd seen what could happen when you didn't. I'd watched Braden disappear into something that shouldn't exist. I was part of the group now, the ones who knew, but knowing came with a price. The ship felt different. Not physically. The engines ran the same. The deck plates were solid under our feet. The equipment worked fine. But there was a presence now, something aware of us. I'd feel it most during the evening hours, when the sun started getting low, but we still had work to finish on deck. A sensation of being watched, not by the crew or by other ships in the distance, by something beneath the water. Sometimes I'd catch the others glancing over the rails with the same uneasy expression I probably wore. Corey would pause in his work and stare at the water for long moments. Terry would grip the wheel tighter when he was steering. Frederick spent more time in the wheelhouse, monitoring radio chatter and weather reports. None of us talked about it directly, but we all felt it. The dream started on the 10th night. I'd fall asleep fine, tired from the day's work. But sometime around 3 or 4 in the morning, I'd find myself standing in dark water up to my chest. The water was warm and perfectly clear. I could see all the way to the bottom, maybe 40 feet down. Shapes moved in the depths, not fish. Larger things with too many arms and eyes that glowed pale blue. They'd swim in slow circles, always staying just at the edge of clear vision. And there were voices. Not words I could understand, but I knew they were calling to me, promising things, showing me glimpses of underwater cities with towers made of coral and bone, places where the water was warm and the pressure didn't crush you, and beautiful creatures swam through streets paved with shells. I'd wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. The taste of salt water in my mouth, even though I hadn't drunk anything. The dreams came every night after that, sometimes twice in one night. I started drinking coffee during evening watch to avoid sleeping too deeply. Corey noticed the exhaustion after a few days. "Dreams?" he asked during a quiet moment while we secured cargo. I nodded. "They'll fade once we reach port," he said. "Always do. You get them too?" "Used to. First few years after I learned the rules. Now they mostly leave me alone." He tied off a rope with practiced efficiency. "It's like they're testing you, seeing if you'll listen." "What happens if you do listen?" Corey's hand stopped moving. "You end up like Braden." I checked the weather report 6 times on our last day at sea. Barometric pressure steady, wind light and variable, clear skies predicted for the next 12 hours. But I kept checking anyway, every hour. Then, every 30 minutes as we approached port. The dreams had gotten stronger the night before, more vivid. The underwater voices had shown me Braden swimming among them, his eyes glowing that same blue-green light. He looked peaceful, happy, like he'd found exactly what he'd been searching for. I'd woken up with my hand reaching toward the porthole, fingers pressed against the glass. For just a moment, I'd wanted to open it, to let the water in. That's when I knew Corey was right. The Gulf was testing me, seeing if I'd break the way Braden had. I spent the morning on deck, watching the shoreline grow larger ahead of us. Real land, real buildings, real people who'd never heard voices from beneath the water. The harbor looked exactly the same as when we'd left 3 weeks ago. Same docks, same other ships tied up waiting for cargo or repairs. Same seagulls circling overhead. But I felt different, changed, like I was carrying something invisible that weighed more than any cargo we'd hauled. When we finally tied up at the dock and Frederick cut the engines, the silence felt strange. No more engine vibration. No more constant motion beneath our feet. Just solid, unmoving ground. I gathered my gear and headed for the gangplank with the rest of the crew. Corey was waiting at the bottom, duffel bag over his shoulder. "You did good, John," he said. "Braden's disappearance wasn't your fault. You followed the rules. That's all any of us can do." I nodded, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. "Will you be back next season?" he asked. I looked at the northern star tied up behind us, then at the water beyond the harbor, stretching out toward the horizon where we'd lost Braden to whatever lived in the deep places. The dreams would fade, Corey had said, but the knowledge wouldn't. I'd always know what was down there now. Always remember the sound of Braden screaming to be released. Always carry those 6 rules in my pocket, and the understanding that they were the only thing standing between me and the creatures that had shown him underwater cities filled with beautiful light. The Gulf had let me go this time, but I could still feel it watching. I stood on deck with my duffel bag, watching the harbor grow larger as we approached. The pay envelope sat heavy in my jacket pocket. Frederick had handed it to me an hour ago without much ceremony, just a nod and the standard thanks for good work. The gray October morning matched my mood. Cold wind cut across the water, carrying the smell of fuel and fish from the docks ahead. Other crew members moved around me, securing lines and preparing for arrival. Their voices sounded normal, casual, like we'd just finished any other fishing run. But I knew better now. The Northern Star's engines slowed as we entered the harbor. Same docks we'd left from 2 weeks ago. Same buildings along the waterfront. Same trucks waiting to haul cargo. Everything looked exactly the way it had before, but I wasn't the same person who'd walked up that gangplank. I'd seen things out there. Heard things. Lost a crew member to something that lived in deep water and called to men through glowing fish. The ship bumped against the dock with a soft thud. Dock workers caught our lines and made us fast. Frederick cut the engines. The sudden quiet felt strange after 2 weeks of constant engine noise. "All ashore," Terry called out. I hefted my bag and walked to the gangplank. Corey stood near the rail watching me. He didn't say anything, but he nodded once. A small gesture that meant more than any speech could have. My boots hit the dock planks with a hollow sound. Solid ground felt weird under my feet after so long on a moving deck. I walked away from the Northern Star without looking back. The envelope in my pocket contained enough money to keep me going for a while. Good pay for 2 weeks' work. But I'd earned every dollar the hard way. The knowledge that came with it wasn't something I'd wanted to learn. I walked through the harbor area, past the fish processing plants and supply stores. My truck sat in the same parking spot where I'd left it. The keys felt cold in my hand. The drive back to Montreal took 8 hours. Same route I'd taken coming down, but everything looked different now. The trees along the highway seemed darker. Every lake and river I passed made me think about what might be living underneath the surface. I kept the radio off. Didn't want to hear weather reports or shipping news. That part of my life was over. Back in the city, I found a small apartment near the old warehouse district. Nothing fancy, but it had thick walls and no windows facing water. I unpacked my duffel bag and put my work clothes in the closet. The smell of salt and diesel still clung to them. That first night I took out the folded paper Corey had given me. 6 rules written in careful handwriting. I read them again, even though I'd memorized every word. Check weather reports every 4 hours. Report changes immediately. Stay below deck during storms. No exceptions. Never take small boats out alone after dark. Always travel in pairs. Report your route. Never approach ships that appear empty or abandoned. Report them and change course. Alert captain and crew immediately if fog rolls in suddenly. Stay inside until it clears. Never keep fish that glow or give off light. Throw them back immediately. Wash hands thoroughly. Simple words that had kept me alive. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my wallet, right behind my driver's license where I'd see it every time I opened the thing. The next week I found work at a construction company, physical labor but on dry land. The foreman didn't ask many questions about my previous job, just wanted to know if I could show up on time and follow instructions. I could do both of those things. Months passed. I settled into a routine. Work during the day, quiet evenings in my apartment. I didn't talk to my coworkers much. They were good people, but they wouldn't understand what I'd seen out there. How could they? It sounded crazy even to me sometimes. But then I'd remember Braden standing at that rail, talking to things in the water that only he could see. The way his eyes had started glowing. The sound of him screaming from that locked storage room. Those memories kept the truth real. Sometimes people would ask why I'd left fishing. Good money out there, they'd say. Steady work for someone willing to do it. I'd just shrug and change the subject. Let them think what they wanted. I never told anyone about Braden Murray. What was the point? The official report said he'd gone overboard during heavy fog, lost at sea. His family had a memorial service. I didn't attend. How could I explain that he hadn't drowned? That something had called to him through a fish that glowed with its own light? That he'd unlocked a storage room door from the inside when the key was on the outside? That I'd seen shapes moving in fog that didn't behave like normal weather? They'd have thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe suggested I talk to someone, get some help. But I knew what I'd experienced. The dreams that came afterward proved it. They started about 6 months after I'd returned to Montreal. Always the same. I'd be standing in dark water, looking down at lights moving far below. Voices would call up to me, too distant to understand the words. Sometimes I'd see Braden swimming among those lights, moving like he'd been born underwater. He'd look up at me and smile, point toward deeper water, try to mouth words I couldn't quite catch. Then something with too many arms would rise from the depths, reaching toward the surface, toward me. That's when I'd wake up, heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat that tasted like salt water. The dreams came maybe once a month, always at night, always the same message. They remembered me. They knew I'd been there, and they'd be waiting if I ever came back. I'd get up after those dreams and check the locks on my apartment door, make sure the windows were secure, pour myself a glass of water and sit in my kitchen until dawn, reading Corey's rules over and over. The paper was getting worn from handling. The ink had faded some, but every word was still clear. Years went by. I moved to a better apartment, got promoted at the construction company, built what most people would call a normal life. But I never forgot what I'd learned out there on the Gulf. Some bodies of water weren't meant for human exploration. They held things that had been there long before we'd learned to build boats. Things that watched and waited and called to certain people through bait they couldn't resist. Glowing fish, empty ships, sudden fog. The rules existed because other men had faced those same temptations and survived to write down their warnings. Corey had gotten his list from someone else. That person had gotten it from someone before them. A chain of knowledge passed down through generations of sailors who'd learned the hard way that some parts of the ocean demanded respect. I kept those rules in my wallet not because I planned to go back to sea, but because they reminded me of something important. Sometimes survival came down to following instructions you didn't fully understand, written by people who'd paid a terrible price to learn what they knew. Braden had ignored the rules. He'd kept that glowing fish, handled it with bare hands, refused to listen when Corey and I tried to warn him. The things in the deep water had used his curiosity against him, shown him visions of underwater cities, and promised him knowledge no surface dweller could imagine. In the end, they'd gotten exactly what they wanted, and Braden had gotten what they'd promised. He was down there with them now, part of whatever civilization existed in the deepest places of the Gulf. Swimming in eternal darkness, surrounded by lights that had never seen the sun. The difference between his fate and mine had come down to a folded piece of paper and the wisdom to follow instructions from someone who knew better than I did. That was the real lesson Corey Palmer had taught me. Sometimes the most important knowledge came from admitting you didn't know everything and listening to those who'd survived to pass on their warnings to the next generation.